BioWare made a recent announcement for Andromeda multiplayer that has people asking a lot of legitimate questions. With a new difficulty and a new race in multiplayer, what does this mean for DLC, if anything? Hey guys, JB here sharing my thoughts on this recent news. As always, if you like what I do here and want to see more, be sure to subscribe. Let's start with what got announced. So we know now that Platinum difficulty is coming to the game, and it's added as free DLC, very similarly to Mass Effect 3's multiplayer, and that game got Platinum difficulty about 5 months after release. And so this is coming sooner relative to the launch date for Andromeda. And if you guys also remember, there was pretty substantial DLCs added to multiplayer, like several new maps, characters, weapons, mods, gear, game types, and more. However, they went in a different direction with multiplayer this time around. It's been a lot more spread out, so you'll see a new character and a new map every month or so. I'm not 100% sure on that, but we don't know entirely what all will be in this update. But probably the biggest and most exciting thing for a lot of people is seeing Batarians, a race from the original trilogy that, we had no idea had a chance of coming to Andromeda. In fact, they did, and we'll talk more about that. But for now, all we know is that they are in multiplayer. The little announcement across social media did not give a firm launch date when we're going to see this update. However, if you go to the website very directly, I'll leave a link in the description below, it says that Platinum difficulty and this update will be arriving on July 6th, which is tomorrow. We did get this tweet from one of the guys working on the multiplayer saying, "Hope everyone enjoyed the teaser today. Pro tip, make sure to get all of your mission funds this week," and a winking emoji. When I saw that, I thought, okay, that means it's probably coming out next week, because he's saying get all your mission funds this week so you can prepare to buy new equipment for your characters next week. But apparently not, because the site says we're going to see this new update tomorrow on July 6th. But that's not all we're going to talk about today, because this announcement has spawned a lot of interesting points across the BioWare community in terms of Mass Effect Andromeda, DLC, which I've already really told you guys how I feel about it. I don't think it's coming, and much more. So there's lots more to discuss with this news. Let's get into it. What I'm about to say is probably going to be obvious to people who play a lot of Andromeda multiplayer already. You follow the mode, you follow the updates, whatever it may be. But the Montreal team has been releasing consistent new things like maps, balance changes, stuff like that. This seems like the most significant thing because they're adding Batarians, so it'll be the first of its kind. But this announcement hit home for me and made me realize Montreal has had the resources to work on this content. And this is despite the May 10th article posted 2 months ago on Kotaku, where they reported that Montreal was scaled down and put on ice, with devs being sent to other EA studios, and they're only retaining a skeleton crew for multiplayer content. So along with keeping the game updated, constant maintenance and putting out new maps, we have to assume that this Batarian update and the Platinum difficulty is what Montreal has been working on this entire time, along with the upkeep like I mentioned. And so again, this begs the question, if you're someone holding on to the fact that single player DLC might be coming, if it were to exist, who the heck is making it? Because I don't think it was easy to implement Platinum difficulty and Batarians. So for me, it's like a murder mystery at this point. Like, who done it? Who is making the single player DLC if it does exist? Another interesting point I've seen brought up is, where did this Batarian asset come from? This is a brand new model made specifically for Andromeda, but as we know, the race was not in the base game. And this one is not just ripped and transplanted from Mass Effect 3. It looks different, just in the same way that all the races look slightly different because they're new and made specifically for Andromeda. The first theory I've seen is that this Batarian model was planned for a single player DLC, and now that that's been scrapped, it's going to be used for multiplayer. To that I say, they could have easily been planned for both. It could have been that there was going to be single player DLC that included Batarians in some form or fashion, but with that DLC also came the Batarians for multiplayer. So I don't think it's necessarily something we can prove right now to say that it's been scrapped from single player and then repurposed for multiplayer. Another theory that makes sense to me is that they made a lot of models for potential races in the game, maybe specifically for DLC, but maybe just for the entire game decided to use some and not use others. And so for the multiplayer DLC, they ended up using Batarians right now, as we can see. If we're going along with the Kotaku narrative of the series being put on ice and Montreal losing a lot of their developers and only the skeleton crew, then this one makes sense to me, because maybe when all of those developers were still there, they had a Batarian model already made for some specific purpose and they decided not to use it. Okay, well, we have multiplayer here now. We know they're going to continue to support multiplayer, so they just just brought that asset and started using it. And I have to imagine there's plenty of work involved with rigging animations and making sure the abilities look good. So if we're talking about this Kotaku timeline, like I said, 2 months ago, they talked about, people being shuttered out to other studios, then it took a little while to get the Batarians working in multiplayer. Of course, we're going to find out tomorrow, but I'm curious to see if Batarians are playable, if they're going to be Batarian characters that we can use in multiplayer, or if they're just going to be enemies. And I think if they are playable, that's going to add another layer of effort that this skeleton crew had to go through in order to implement this update with Batarians. Another angle I've seen for this is people asking, how the heck are Batarians in Andromeda anyway? They weren't on the 4 arcs that we've seen already, and we've been through a good part of Helios with Ryder anyway. So what's up there? We do have a direct answer on this. Fernando Mello, one of the producers who works on multiplayer, responded with lore secrets when asked how they got there. So things we're going to learn when the update actually drops. And he also confirmed that this update and the Batarians are only in multiplayer. So if you're holding out even with this announcement for single-player Batarians, either they're not telling us right now or it's not coming. Mr. Mello is very careful with his words, so this doesn't refute the possibility, and I think that's on purpose. So for the sake of this video and until we find out, I've got a few theories on this and things I've seen on Twitter. The first one is that the Batarians smuggled their way aboard the arcs that we've already seen, and this one seems unlikely to me because, you've got the cryopods. They wouldn't be able to survive the journey. However, I will say that the Batarians' lifespan is relatively unknown. Unless I don't know how to Google, I really tried to find the lifespan of Batarians, and a lot of the time you'll see unknown, but it's assumed generally that it's around Turians and humans. It's 80 to 100 years. It's just hard for me to understand exactly how, the logistics of how Batarians could have smuggled themselves aboard, so I don't think theory number 1 is very sound. If it indeed happened, then they would have needed a lot of help, and a lot of people probably would have known because of those cryopods. Theory number 2, and more likely for me, is that Batarians were accepted aboard the Quarian arc that reached Andromeda, and we know that they reached Andromeda because we got that transmission. At the very end of the game, the Kila Sia sent a message, a warning message, a stay away message to Ryder and Arc Hyperion. I don't think this is impossible, and I'm going to link you guys to a thread from Seiko's Daily. Someone who follows me on Twitter wrote a nice little piece on how this is possible based on lore and data pads and, voice recordings, all kinds of stuff. It is absolutely speculative, but you have to wonder, this arc, this Quarian arc, had a lot of different races on it. It was kind of like the Jack of all trades arc where you just throw all of the other important races on. Maybe somehow the Quarian arc is found or it crashed and the Batarians got out, and that's how they are in multiplayer. We don't know yet. We'll find out soon. But overall, the idea that Batarians got here somehow really opens up the door for the Quarian arc playing a role in Andromeda and it actually showing up within the story, whether that affects single player or not. And that brings me to my final point, which might upset some people. I think it's a real possibility, and it's that since launch, there's been this separate side story going on throughout Apex missions and briefings, even one of them that I reported on and shared with you guys that mentions the Quarian arc. That was several weeks ago, and we haven't heard another peep about it in more recent briefings and missions. So if you take into account that there has been a side story running along Andromeda since launch, then here's a few things you can come to. Number 1 is that this DLC and update will be leading up to some kind of single player DLC. That's a very optimistic look, but I wouldn't get your hopes up. Once again, we've talked about it nonstop. So Kotaku, reputable sources, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to get into that in this video, but there's one idea. The other theory, which again I think is more realistic, is that this update is fleshing out this side story that they've been keeping up the entire time, and the Quarian arc might only exist within the context of Apex missions and briefings. Again, I think this is a real possibility. We might just be seeing another mention of the Quarian arc, and that's how the Batarians got here, and that would be disappointing, right? But I think it's possible, man. They mentioned the Quarian arc already within one Apex mission briefing and then left it alone completely. Who's to say they're not going to just update us and say the Quarian arc arrived, the Batarians came with it? Who knows? Despite everything that's been reported, for those of you still holding on to hope, I am crossing my fingers. Obviously, I want to see some DLC, and I think what we're going to see tomorrow is going to shed some light on what we can expect. I'd love to know in the comment section below, what theory do you have for the Batarians appearing in Andromeda? How the heck did they get here? I know this question's only good for a day because we're about to find out soon. It'll be cool to see the before and after and see who was able to predict it. So share your theories in the comment section below. If you're still watching and you enjoy the video, click the like button and subscribe for more content like this. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook so you don't miss another video. Sign up with Juniper to receive exclusive discounts on shirts, hoodies, and more at the JV merch store. Click the link in the description below for more details. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.